Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, given the Prime Minister's parliamentary statement on December 17, 2018, which committed to provide state lands to former Petrotrin workers for both housing as well as agricultural use, could the Prime Minister give an update on how many of these workers have received land over the past 11 months?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the distribution of land under the circumstances is not as easy as distributing hops bread. It requires a certain amount of identification of the lands, preparation of the lands, and eventually, when those works are finished, those plots will be available. Madam Speaker, I want to advise you that having learned from the Caroni experience, where a similar undertaking was given and actions were taken to provide lands for employees in similar circumstances, and which resulted in huge scandals and losses to the taxpayer, we are making haste to ensure that such is not repeated. But we give the assurance, Madam Speaker, that having identified parcels of lands, and now we move towards getting the relevant approvals, and then there will be the infrastructural works to go in that eventually those workers would be allowed to have those plots as per the commitments given. It's not an overnight thing.
Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Prime Minister, based on your response, could you state if a committee has been set up or formed to look at the allocation of these lands, where it would be in the assets of Petrotrin, and if so, who are the members of that committee?
So I'll allow one question. Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, yes, we have, in order to begin the process, a committee has been set up and to identify suitable lands, and that committee is at work, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental. Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Based on your response, Prime Minister, could you state who are the members of that committee and headed by who? Well,
Madam Speaker, I cannot at the moment, I don't remember exactly who is on the committee, but I seem to recall that there were persons we took from the HDC. There were persons from the HDC and professional persons who would have been given the assignment. And I don't want to guess, but if the certain member asks the question with the appropriate notes, I can give all those details.
Supplemental. Member for Point of Peer.
thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, do you have a deadline date or a specific timeline for the country to get a response, or the Petrotrin workers to get a response?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as I try to point out, these are not things that have deadline dates on them. We approach it in a reasonable and responsible way, and they're step by step. And the first thing is to identify across the southern and central part of the country lands in the hands of the state which can be utilized, and then seek to find out whether approvals can be had for those lands to be developed. And then we have to do surveys, then we have to do infrastructure and so on. So to ask for a deadline date, no, Madam Speaker, is just being mischievous.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister state if the Paria Fuel Trading Company has been the recipient of any value-added tax write-offs from the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, words have different meanings to different people. I don't want to talk about tax write-offs, but what I can tell you, Madam Speaker, is that Paria Trading is exempted from the payment of VAT on fuel. This avoids the complication of sizable refunds, as is normal in the fuel sector, in the energy sector, and there's no net loss of revenue.
Member for Cuba South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister inform this House what compensation, if any, was paid to Mrs. Jacqueline Wilson, former Permanent Secretary and Human Resource Expert, Ms. Folade Matuta, Director of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, and Ms. Eileen Green, Attorney at Law, for serving on the committee appointed to look into allegations of sexual misconduct at the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, contrary to the misinformation and the mischief being spread by the member for Couva South and others about payment being made to these public-spirited officers, no payment has been made to any of those persons.
Supplemental, member for Couva South.
Yes, Madam Speaker, and I am just searching for information, and at no point in time I have been involved in spreading any mischief.
Is that a question, member for?
I will now.
Member for Couva North.
I will ask.
Member for Couva North, can we move on to the next question, please? Couva North, next question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Whether there are currently 1975 limited former workers yet to receive residential and agricultural leases?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I was told that under the last government, all of these workers had received their leases. Turns out not to be true, Madam Speaker. The bottom line is, Madam Speaker, that arising out of the Caroni closure and the 2003 agreement, 8,855 residential plots were to be made available to Caroni workers. To be able to deliver that on that commitment, Madam Speaker, 16 sites were identified for development of lands, meaning the building of infrastructure and so on. And of the 16 sites, 4,000, and in fact, Madam Speaker, I correct that, there were 30 sites that were identified. 16 of those sites would have accommodated 4,504 workers, and of those 4,504 workers who could have been accommodated on those 16 sites on which certain works were completed, 4,274 have been completed, and there are only 230 leases still have to be executed on those sites once those persons are properly identified and located. 14 sites are subject to incomplete works and are involved in serious litigation and major scandals, Madam Speaker, with respect to the infrastructure development works. There are certain court matters, there are certain investigations and so on going on. And of those sites, I'm happy to say, Madam Speaker, we are aiming that by 2020, 355 of those leases can be distributed in exchange to a site. By May 2020, a further 900 leases at the exchange 2B site and Picton 1. And after that, there will be 2,271 sites that will be available.
Supplemental, member for Oropouche West.
Honourable Prime Minister, are you aware that on the 28th of June 2019, the Minister of Agriculture answered a question, an oral question I had asked him, and he said 400 leases were going to be brought in next week, which will take us to the first week in July, to Cabinet for approval. Can you let us know how many of those 400 leases were approved?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, considering the nature of that question, I'll advise my colleague to place that question to the appropriate minister with the appropriate notice, and you'll get the appropriate answer.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister state what plan is in place to prevent other downstream industrial plants dependent on natural gas from shutting down?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is important to note that NGC has completed new gas supply contracts with Nutrien, CNC, and N2000, meaning that's 8 plants in all, and is currently in advanced commercial negotiations with other downstream operators, which, Madam Speaker, is a long way from having these plants on month-to-month contracts, and of course, having them with no gas supply. We have made tremendous progress here, Madam Speaker, and the progress continues.
Supplemental, member Garrison.
Prime Minister, what is the situation with the methanol plants that we have here in Trinidad and Tobago? How many of them are up, and are negotiations being engaged for all of these?
Member for Caroni Central, I don't see this as supplemental arising out of the question that was asked. Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister state at what stage is the land acquisition process for the new Tobago Airport Terminal?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, after significant investigations and preparations, the Cabinet has approved NIDCO's progress with respect to the publishing of Section 3 notices on the parcel of land which is of interest for this project. So NIDCO is progressing along those lines.
Supplemental, member for Couva North.
Sure, thank you. Prime Minister, can you say how soon before these lands are dealt with properly?
The lands are being dealt with properly at this time, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental, member for Oakwood West.
Honourable Minister, are valuation reports prepared? Honourable Prime Minister. Are the valuation reports already prepared and presented to those landowners?
Prime Minister.
Valuation reports.
Madam Speaker, if the member will consult what Section 3 means, that answer has been given. We are at the stage of the Section 3 process, and certain actions are mandated by law, and valuations are an integral part of that at a particular stage, Madam Speaker. The government is acquiring these lands under law, and the questions are, in fact, to be answered by saying that we are proceeding under the law.
Supplemental, member for Couva North.
Can you say what is the cost to government so far?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, at this stage, we are not in a position to answer that question. The cost will emerge as the valuations appear, and at that stage, Madam Speaker, if the appropriate question is asked with the appropriate notice, we can give it down to the Senate.
Supplemental, member for Oakwood West.
Prime Minister, surely I know what Section 3 means.
Member.
My question.
Well,
I need to ask.
you allowed a question. Thank you.
Yes.
Run up with.
1 minute, please. Member for Couva South.
Yes.
Member for Couva South.
Yes.
I'm sure if you exercise the proper protocols, you'll be observed.
I will.
This is not a conversation.
Well,
It is not a... Member for Couva South, this is the last time I'm going to warn you. If you wish, there are options that you can voluntarily exercise. Please don't let me have to have regard to the standing orders. Member for Oakwood West.
Are you aware that Section 3, with Section 3, valuations are done simultaneously? So the question I'm asking is that what is the cost per square foot? What is the cost per square foot that assessed for the landowners? Cost per square foot for the land.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I've said all that I intend to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in this question. I don't know what lesson my colleague is trying to give me. I have no interest in fireside law.
Member for Couva North.
Madam Speaker, could the Prime Minister state whether negotiations for a new operator of the Magdalena Grand are complete?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I didn't hear the question.
Member for Couva North.
Could the Prime Minister state whether negotiations for a new operator of the Magdalena Grand are complete?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as of yesterday, the advice to the Cabinet is that the lawyers are finalizing this matter. They are in the last stages, I would say. There's one document being finalized because they've exchanged certain documents, and there's one document being finalized now. And upon completion of that, in the very near future, this month, the next few days, I presume, on completion of that final document, we expect that Apple Leisure would be in a position to execute.
Supplemental, member for Kumutu Manzanilla.
Thank you. Honourable Prime Minister, could you advise who the lawyers are?
Prime Minister.
No, I can't advise that, but if you give notice, I'll tell you who they are. It's not in the Prime Minister's office, so I don't have that information with me.
Member for Chaguanas West.
To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister indicate if he's aware that the Acting Director of the National Lotteries Control Board has been sent on leave and or suspended this week? And if so, can he indicate the reasons for the same?
Prime Minister.
got one of these answers somewhere here. Yes, Madam Speaker, my apologies. I was just searching to my papers there. The acting director proceeded on 2 weeks vacation leave to allow the Central Audit Committee of the Ministry of Finance to conduct an audit into transactions and payments involving the Lotto agents attached to the NLCB.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you very much. To the Prime Minister, given the high rates of unemployment and underemployment of our youth in fence-line communities due to the closure or downsizing of major employers, such as Petrotrin, can the Prime Minister state what specifically is being done to create jobs that align with the qualifications and experience of those affected?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'm not aware, other than the closure of the Petrotrin refinery, I'm not aware of any closure of Petrotrin and closure and downsizing of major employers such as Petrotrin. So if that is the question, I'm simply going to refer to the refinery which has been closed. What we have done, Madam Speaker, is to have invited the international community, which involves local interests, to put proposals for the possible restart of the refinery. Once that becomes successful, Madam Speaker, we anticipate that certain kinds of jobs will become available to persons who have those skills. And other than that, Madam Speaker, we have taken steps to have certain projects initiated in and around the San Fernando area. And I could point out, Madam Speaker, for the first time, actual work is underway towards the operation of a San Fernando waterfront project, which will grow in strength and character. We have a number of other projects in housing. We are also in the private sector, the Ministry of Planning and Development, approving a number of private sector initiatives for the San Fernando and environs area. And of course, overall, Madam Speaker, we work towards growth in the national economy. And we expect, Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, all such persons as mentioned in this question would have the opportunity for advancement. Thank you, Madam.
Mr. Prime Minister, has any study been done at all to identify the jobs that have been lost and possible replace and specific possible replacement opportunities, or are we leaving it to VAPs?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this government does nothing by VAPs. We do it by order, reason, and competence.
Then in proper proactive mode, could the Minister identify, could the Prime Minister identify who is doing this study that would identify the gaps that have been created by the closure of the company?
Madam Speaker, I made no reference to any study. We have a whole of government response to this, and all government ministries that are engaged in advancement of the economy is involved in this matter.
Clearly, Prime Minister, there are skills gaps that exist, and in a proactive mode, one would have identified the gaps and develop industries consistent with the displaced jobs.
Member for Naparima, next question.
Given comments that the Point Lease's model has outlived its usefulness, can the Prime Minister state whether the government is considering any review of this model?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, comments are available a dozen for a dime. Some comments are not even worthy of being read. So unless the member is prepared to tell me which of the comments, you're putting me in a difficult position. Can't respond to every comment being made, especially coming from him. But what I can say, Madam Speaker, is that the Point Lease's model has not outlived its usefulness. It has been a very successful model called the Trinidad model and is acclaimed internationally. It has been adopted by several countries, especially the developing gas-based economies in Africa. What is happening at this time is that the gas value chain has been evolving to meet new circumstances. The upstream producers, BPTT, Shell, EOG, etc. These the aggregator NGC and downstream operators are redesigning the gas value chain in complex and sensitive commercial negotiations. And Madam Speaker, any person paying attention to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago will see a model alive and well and flexible as against the misinformation being spread by those who should be strengthening Trinidad.
According to commentators, and I recall immediately Mr. Mariano Brown, the pointless model.
Member for Naparima, please.
The pointless model is based on abundant cheap gas and high commodity prices. Given systemic challenges and abundant cheap shale gas, how do we intend to compete with the US and other major suppliers of cheap natural gas?
I know you intend for it to collapse and close down.
Not at
This government will do everything possible to that happen.
Supplemental, Member for Naparima.
Yes. Madam Speaker, it is important that we do the necessary studies and we are not caught unaware. Is the Prime Minister doing any study and scenarios to cater for any eventuality?
Prime Minister.
I am studying your attempt to undermine the national interest, Madam Speaker. That's what I'm studying.
Supplemental, Member for Naparima.
Madam Speaker, it is in my intention to point Trinidad and Tobago in a proactive Singaporean mode. And therefore we are not caught by scratch. What is your study? What is the study?
Member for Naparima.
No, you just shouting. What is the study and who is doing it? We are not caught. We are not caught.
Madam Speaker, I have answered that question.
4 times.
I have answered the question. I am simply not agreeing with the attitude and ridiculousness of the member for Naparima. The pointless model is a model which we can defend and which we hold out very proudly. As a matter of fact, as I speak to you now, the Equatorial Guinea, the Minister of Energy from Trinidad and Tobago, has been invited, and so was I, to Equatorial Guinea because they are so enamored with our model. Right? And that, Madam Speaker, is the same model that was there while they were in government for 5 years and didn't negotiate a single gas contract. Not a single contract. And all of a sudden they're now talking about study. The only study they know is Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is their study.
Yes.
Any more questions?
Member for Naparima, you have one more supplemental?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Is the Prime Minister aware at all that companies, downstream industries, a number of them are moving to the United States because of cheap shale oil gas, and this is a threat? What are we doing to deal with that?
I won't allow that as a supplemental question.